Imagine this. A really tense moment in history. A city, Medina, just buzzing with different groups, divided loyalties.
Yeah, you've got migrants, locals, different tribes, different faiths. It's a powder keg, really.
Exactly. And instead of just forcing order, they sat down. They formalized their social contract. They actually wrote it down.
Not just poetry or some decree from a king. This was about building something functional, an architecture for justice, for peace that could actually last.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at six really early precedents, foundational moments that set up the basic grammar of Islamic constitutionalism.
Right. These aren't just, old stories. They're blueprints. They
Yeah.
show how abstract ideas, peace, justice get turned into actual working principles for law and governance.
How you go from a shaky coalition to something more resilient, a state based on rules.
Precisely.
So our mission here for you listening is to give you a kind of shortcut to understand where this early constitutional thinking came from, its structure.
Yeah, because whether you're leading a team today or drafting policy or even just curious about how societies organize themselves.
These cases offer some powerful insights. How do you engineer stability when things could easily fall apart?
And these principles, set way back then in Medina, they echo through history. You see them reflected in later governance.
And they connect to modern ideas too, right? Political science, managing diversity.
Absolutely. The core challenges are often quite similar. How do you manage different groups under one umbrella?
Okay, so let's lay out the 6 pillars we're tackling. We want to give you a really solid overview of how these early decisions still resonate, how they apply.
Okay, first up, a written constitution, but specifically a pluralistic one, binding on everyone.
Second, there's the mechanism for making decisions legit, a binding consultative framework. We know it as Shūrā.
Third, protecting the individual, securing personal liberties against, arbitrary customs or tribal punishments. That was a big shift.
Fourth, thinking about shared resources. Public infrastructure roads, wells defined as a public trust. Everyone's responsibility.
Fifth, turning consultation into an actual duty for the government itself. Leaders had to seek counsel on big issues. Accountability.
And finally, number 6, making administration simple, or simpler anyway, but with strong accountability. Efficiency and trust working together.
Those are the 6. They really form the foundation.
So where do we start?
Let's begin with the cornerstone, that foundational social contract itself, case number 1.
Okay, let's unpack this first one, the Constitution of Medina implementation case. We're talking Medina, year 1 in the Islamic calendar, 622 CE. What did Medina actually look like then?
Chaotic is probably a fair word. Yathrib, as it was known before, it wasn't unified. It was a collection of clans often locked in these long, bitter feuds, generations of conflict sometimes.
And then into this mix come the migrants from Mecca, the Mushir. They've left everything behind.
Right. And you have the local hosts, the Anar, who welcome them. Plus, and this is crucial, significant, well-established Jewish communities and other non-Muslim clans who were major players there already, economically, militarily.
So the risks of it all just fracturing must have been incredibly high.
Absolutely critical. You have this new bond of faith, yes, but the old tribal loyalties, they run deep, super deep.
Any move that looked like favoring one group, the migrants over the hosts, Muslims over Jews, one clan over another, could have just shattered the whole thing.
Exactly. The Ummah, the community, was fragile. It needed structure immediately, something everyone could agree on that went beyond bloodlines or old customs.
But a structure that didn't demand everyone become the same?
That's the key. Unity without forced assimilation.
So the Prophet Muhammad, the sources tell us, convenes the stakeholders, and importantly, it's all the key stakeholders.
Right. Muslims, Jews, the clan leaders, and they draft this document, a binding social contract, the Constitution of Medina.
And you called it a birth certificate earlier. It's not just a treaty between, say, 2 tribes. It's defining a new kind of political entity.
Defined by shared rules and where you lived, not just who your ancestors were.
Okay, let's get into the core principles. Why was it so revolutionary?
Well, first, and this is probably the most striking part, it establishes one polity, one ummah, but explicitly preserves the many communities within it.
So unity and diversity aren't opposites here.
No, they're built into the structure. It recognized the distinct religious and political identities of all the groups, Muslims, Jews, the different clans, but said, okay, you're all part of this single civic structure now.
That sounds like real functional pluralism, not just tolerance, but actual shared citizenship.
It is. And tied to that, the guarantee of freedom of religion. Explicitly.
No coercion.
No coercion. Communities could practice their own faiths, manage their internal affairs according to their own laws and traditions. The shared civic identity didn't require religious
Well,
conformity.
huge for the time.
Massive. Then there's collective security. This was also a game changer.
How so?
It stated clearly, an attack on any group signatory to this Constitution is an attack on all of them. Defense is mutual.
So you couldn't just sit back if another group was attacked.
Nope. And conversely, you couldn't make separate deals or alliances that undermine the collective defense. Betrayal was forbidden. Unity in the face of external threats.
You mentioned earlier this had financial implications, too.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Before, defense was a clan responsibility, paid for in blood or maybe some sudden levy. Very unpredictable, often leading to more feuds.
Right.
This mutual defense clause, it essentially created a shared financial responsibility. It moved towards a more predictable civic contribution or tax for security, institutionalizing public finance for defense.
From a reactive tribal setup to a more preventative, state-like model.
Exactly. And underpinning all this was the rule of law. The Constitution insisted that disputes had to be referred to and agreed upon authority, ultimately God and the prophet.
So no more favoritism based on who you knew or how powerful your clan was.
That was the principle. The law, the written agreement, trumped personal connections or wealth. Everyone, powerful or vulnerable, was subject to the same rules.
And it also stressed the public interest first, meaning
Alliances, economic decisions, defense. They all had to be coordinated for the benefit of the entire polity. Not just for one group, not just for the ruling elite. Continuous coordination for the common good.
Okay, so let's pull back. What's the modern relevance here? You said it's a model for pluralist constitutionalism.
It really is. It shows it's possible, maybe difficult, but possible to build a shared civic identity that respects deep differences, whether those are religious, tribal, ideological.
It gives us a kind of blueprint for interfaith citizenship, maybe, within a single legal order.
I think so. Look at societies today struggling with diversity, with political tribalism, post-conflict situations. This document offers a way to think about creating a commonwealth that doesn't demand everyone erase their distinctiveness.
And you called it a peace architecture.
Yeah, because it did two things simultaneously. It organized defense against outside threats, and it set up rules to minimize conflict inside the community.
And, crucially, prevented arbitrary rule right from the start.
When you have a written agreement that binds everyone from the top down, that's how a collection of feuding groups starts to become a resilient society. That's the power of Case 1.
Okay, so we have the foundational document, the Constitution. But a document alone isn't enough, right? It needs an engine, something to keep it working, responsive.
Exactly. And that engine is consultation, Shūrā, which brings us to our second section, looking at legitimacy and accountability.
And the key point here is that Shūrā wasn't just like a polite suggestion. Hey, maybe ask around.
Not at all. It was framed as a binding law, an essential constitutional mechanism for stable and legitimate governance.
Let's start with Case 2, the Comprehensive Consultation Shūrā Framework Case. So it's more than courtesy, it's baked into the system.
Baked in. It required leadership to listen, to test their ideas, to actively bring in different perspectives, informed opinions from a wide range of people.
What are the core constitutional aspects of this Shūrā idea?
Okay, first, consultation as an obligation. On major issues, things affecting everyone, big policy decisions, matters of public faith leadership had to consult.
So a leader might still make the final call.
They might retain that authority, yes. But if they acted alone, without going through the required consultation process, their decision lacked legitimacy. They basically forfeited it.
Interesting.
Second, the deliberation needed to be evidence-based. It wasn't just about popularity contests or what felt good.
Not just polling.
No, it demanded rigor. You had to weigh the actual impact on the community. Look at the facts, listen to experiences, consider different expert viewpoints, not just go with a leader's gut feeling or personal bias.
That moves leadership away from just charisma.
Towards calculation, towards informed judgment, using the best available evidence to solve public problems. That's a big difference from, say, traditional kingship.
Makes sense. And the third aspect.
Legitimacy through participation. This is almost a universal principle, isn't it? People are more likely to support something they had a hand in creating.
Right. Buy-in.
Exactly. By making participation a constitutional part of the process, the system builds that buy-in. People are more likely to accept the final decision, even if it's tough or a compromise, because they were part of the deliberation.
Where do we see echoes of this today?
Oh, everywhere, really. Think about public hearings before new law is passed, citizen assemblies debating constitutional changes, expert advisory councils for government agencies.
Bigger world, too.
Definitely. Steering committees, risk assessment boards, stakeholder consultations before a big project. They're all functional equivalents. They distribute the burden and the legitimacy of the decision.
And you mentioned AI ethics earlier.
Yes, the immediate rush to create diverse ethics panels, technical review boards for AI development. That's pure Shūrā in principle. You can't govern something so impactful without mandated input from those affected and those who understand it.
So if the Constitution is the skeleton,
Then Shūrā is the circulatory system. It keeps the whole thing alive, oxygenated with reality, with expertise, prevents it from becoming rigid or out of touch.
that's a great analogy. It makes the system resilient beyond just the founder, right? It embeds good process.
Precisely. It's not just reliant on having a wise leader at the helm forever. The system itself promotes better decisions.
Okay, now let's link this to Case 5, Governmental Consultation Requirement case. How is this different from the general Shūrā principle?
Case 5 gets more specific. It makes the government itself, the administration, the executive branch, the bureaucracy, duty-bound to consult on core state matters.
So it's moving from a general principle to a hard rule for government officials.
Exactly. This applies specifically to things like cabinet-level decisions, major security strategies, crucial budget or fiscal policies, the stuff that really shapes the nation's fate.
And the goal is to prevent what? Unilateralism.
Precisely. To stop powerful figures from making huge decisions impacting everyone without proper counsel and deliberation.
What are the constitutional mechanics of this governmental duty?
Okay, first, it demands institutionalized counsel. This isn't just chatting with your buddies.
Right.
It means setting up formal structures, advisory bodies, bringing in qualified experts from different fields, making sure key community stakeholders are systematically included. It professionalizes the advice-giving process.
Makes it less ad hoc.
Much less. Second, and this is huge for transparency, a record of deliberation.
The paper trail.
Paper trail. Major decisions need a documented rationale. How was this choice made? What options were considered? What advice was received? It creates an auditable record.
Which allows for accountability later on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can look back and see if warnings were ignored, if the process was followed. Decisions aren't made in secret shadows. It allows for real, retrospective accountability.
And the third point follows from that.
Yes, accountable leadership. Leaders aren't just meant to make decisions. They have a duty to explain them publicly, transparently, using that documented rationale from the deliberation.
Transparency is a requirement, not a bonus.
Non-negotiable for legitimacy in this system.
So if we put Case 2, the broad framework, and Case 5, the specific government duty, together, what's the big takeaway?
I think it boils down to this. Power without counsel is fragile. It relies entirely on one person's wisdom, which is never foolproof.
Whereas power with documented, institutionalized counsel
Is legitimate and much more resilient. It can withstand challenges, adapt, and maintain public trust over the long haul.
You see the parallels today with things like freedom of information laws.
Definitely. FOI, detailed government white papers explaining policy choices, the whole push for public consultation and buy-in through transparency, it's all rooted in this same idea.
Showing your work, essentially.
Showing your work, exactly. And when governance fails spectacularly today, often you can trace it back to a failure in this area. A big decision made behind closed doors, no record, no real consultation, then chaos when things go wrong.
Transparency, accountability, participation seems timeless. But even with these checks on power, what about the individual? What stops the state, or even powerful customs, from crushing personal freedom?
Good question. That leads us right into the next section.
Right. Because having a well-structured state is one thing, but if it doesn't protect the individual citizen from arbitrary power, what's the point? Especially power rooted in those old, often harsh, pre-existing customs.
So this brings us to Section 3, Securing the Individual, focusing on Case 3, Individual Liberty Protection Framework. The key here seems to be actively pushing back against arbitrary tribal practices.
Yes, the new constitutional order couldn't just ignore the status quo. It had to actively restrain some deeply entrenched customs.
Nice customs like.
Well, a big one was collective responsibility. The default in many tribal systems was, one person does wrong, their whole family or clan pays the price. Instant retribution, cycles of violence.
So the idea of no collective punishment must have been radical. In a society built on clan loyalty and blood feuds, saying only the individual is responsible. It was an earthquake, absolutely. It legally separated the person from the automatic liability of their group. The sources are clear. If you commit a crime, your family isn't automatically on the hook for retaliation or payment.
That's the bedrock of individual legal responsibility, isn't it? The system deals with the person, not the group identity.
Precisely. And beyond collective punishment, the framework also pushed back against degrading customs or forced conformity,
Meaning?
protecting the individual's personal sphere from, say, community pressure to follow customs that violated basic dignity, or stopping local chiefs from just suspending someone's freedoms on a whim, protecting people from being bullied into line by the group.
Okay, so what are the core constitutional principles underpinning these protections?
First, establishing human dignity is fundamental. Personal rights aren't gifts from a ruler or a tribe. They're baseline protections that everyone has inherently.
Rights that come before the government.
Exactly. That's classic constitutional thinking. Second, due process. You can't just punish someone. There has to be a lawful reason, a fair process investigation, evidence, a hearing before the proper authority, predictability and impartiality in justice.
Makes sense.
And third, something called non-derogation. This means these fundamental rights shouldn't be easily suspended, not even for convenience or during tough times.
Ah, so this is the real test, when things get difficult.
That's always the test, isn't it? A constitution shows its strength not when everything's easy and is protecting popular opinion.
But when it protects the unpopular person, the dissident, someone from a minority group.
Exactly. When it protects them from the whim of the majority or the state, even when there's pressure to silence them or override their rights. The system has to bind the state, especially when it's politically difficult.
You can draw a straight line from that to modern bills of rights, constitutional court battles.
Absolutely. And also to things like modern HR policies fighting discrimination or collective blame in workplaces. And crucially, to the safeguards built into emergency laws today, ensuring basic human dignity and due process remain even during crises like pandemics or conflicts.
So individual liberty is secured. But individuals live in communities, they rely on shared resources. How did the framework address that?
Good point. Protecting the individual is half the battle. Protecting the public sphere, the commons, is the other half. Which takes us to our final section on public trust and administration.
Okay, section 4. Let's start with case 4, public infrastructure maintenance case. This seems to be about how you view shared stuff, roads, wells, markets, mosques.
Right. The key idea here is defining these things not as the personal property of the ruler or a powerful plan.
Not private trophies.
Exactly. But as public trusts, held in trust for the benefit of everyone.
That framing immediately creates a responsibility, doesn't it?
A non-negotiable communal responsibility.
Yeah.
The constitutional core here is all about managing these shared assets properly.
First principle being
Commons stewardship. An explicit duty for the community, led by the government, to maintain and protect these shared assets. Prevent them from falling apart, ensure they're used responsibly, not just exploited for private gain.
And second, fair access.
Yes. You can't block people from using essential public resources. The law had to be clear. No putting a private gate across the main road or denying access to the only well just because the land next to it is yours.
Public right-of-way access to essentials trumps private claims in that context.
It had to. And this connects directly to economic fairness, too, through the prevention of harm principle.
Meaning market regulation.
Yes. Early mandates for things like stopping fraud in the marketplace, preventing hoarding of essential goods, cracking down on price gouging. These are all seen as harming the community's shared economic well-being.
So the Constitution wasn't just about abstract rights. It was about practical stuff like fair prices.
It's very practical. The sources mention officials, mutasib, market inspectors, whose job wasn't just taxes, but ensuring honest weights, fair dealing, preventing monopolies or artificial shortages, protecting the ordinary person's economic life.
You said earlier a just constitution is visible on the street. This sounds like what you meant.
Exactly. Safe roads, clean water, markets where you won't get ripped off. That's tangible justice.
The modern links seem obvious here. City rules for utilities,
consumer protection laws, antitrust legislation, and now things like ESG principles in managing infrastructure, thinking about climate resilience, fair resource distribution. It's the same core idea.
Yeah.
Manage shared assets for shared benefit. It's a trust.
Okay, that covers the public trust aspect. Now, the final pillar, case 6, seems to be about the government machine itself.
Right. Case 6, bureaucratic simplification and accountability case. The core instructions sound simple, but doing it is hard. Reduce unnecessary complexity and clarify responsibility.
Government offices should serve people, not hide behind red tape.
Precisely. Because complexity is where inefficiency hides, and sometimes corruption too. So the constitutional core here tackles both process and people.
First step?
Clarity of roles, making it crystal clear who decides what, and crucially, who answers for it.
If roles are fuzzy, accountability vanishes. Everyone points fingers.
Exactly. So for a new state, defining administrative lanes, who handles taxes, who judges disputes, who manages defense logistics, was a huge step towards a functional, predictable government, not an arbitrary one.
Second, lean process, cutting out the pointless hoops.
Yes, systematically getting rid of bureaucratic steps that just waste citizens' time and energy when they're trying to get something done, access a service, or seek justice. Make the process efficient from the citizen's perspective.
But wait, you need records for accountability, right? Doesn't that add complexity, more bureaucracy? How did they square that circle?
That's a really good point. The sources suggest the balance was struck by focusing the complexity internally on robust record-keeping for accountability, like we saw in Case 5, while simultaneously working to streamline the processes that the citizen actually experienced.
Ah, okay. So detailed records for the auditors, but a simple path for the applicant.
That seems to be the principle. Complexity where needed for oversight, simplicity where possible for the user. And the final piece is the ethical guardrails.
Holding office is a trust.
A trust, Alana, not a personal perk. Actively preventing conflicts of interest, stopping officials from exploiting their position. The official is a steward of public resources, not the owner.
And the payoff for all this, for the citizen.
Trust. When you understand who's responsible, how things are supposed to work, and how you can make your voice heard if something's wrong, the Constitution feels real. Predictability builds trust.
We see this today in efforts to cut red tape, service charters promising certain standards.
Ombudsman offices to handle complaints, conflict of interest rules for politicians and officials, all aimed at making government understandable, accessible, and accountable. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, wow. That was a deep dive into those first 6 pillars. We've covered a lot of ground from the foundations of pluralism and collective security right through to individual rights and making government work efficiently.
It's a dense foundation. Let's just quickly recap the 6 pillars for everyone listening. Nail down those core principles.
Good idea. Case 1. The written pluralist constitution. Binding everyone, creating one civic entity but respecting diverse communities within it.
Case 2. Comprehensive consultation, Shūrā. Making legitimacy dependent on broad, evidence-based participation, not just optional.
Case 3. Protecting individual liberty. Establishing baseline rights, due process, human dignity, pushing back against arbitrary custom.
Case 4. Public infrastructure as a public trust. Mandating shared stewardship, fair access, and economic protection for the community.
Case 5. Governmental consultation as a duty. Requiring institutionalized counsel, recorded deliberations for transparency and accountability at the top.
And Case 6. Bureaucratic simplicity and accountability. Clarifying roles, streamlining processes for citizens, and establishing ethical guardrails for officials.
So for anyone listening, leaders, policymakers, just curious minds, what are the big takeaways? What should we do with this knowledge?
Well, it pushes us to think beyond just slogans. Design genuinely inclusive charters and systems that mandate fairness.
Build consultative cultures in our organizations and actually keep records of how decisions are made. Make legitimacy earned, not assumed.
Treat public assets, whether that's physical infrastructure or even data commons today, as sacred trusts. Manage them for the long-term public good, not short-term gain.
And make accountability visible, simple, and auditable. Don't let complexity become an excuse for avoiding responsibility.
Exactly. Make it easy for people to see who is responsible and how they can be held to account.
Now, before we sign off, you mentioned a final provocative thought.
Yeah, something to mull over. Looking at these 6 foundational precedents: pluralism, consultation, liberty, public trust, governmental duty, simplicity, accountability. Ask yourself, which one would be the hardest to truly implement in your own organization or community today? And then dig deeper. Why? Why the resistance to that specific principle? Is it fear of losing control? Is it the perceived burden of transparency? Or just old habits, institutional inertia, maybe even a preference for complexity or tribalism?
That definitely gives us something to think about, a real mirror to hold up.
Okay.
Looking ahead, what's next in our deep dive?
We're moving into Chapter 2 next time. That covers cases 7 through 15.
And the focus there.
It shifts more towards political representation and civic participation.
Yeah.
We'll get into how authority was delegated, the idea of merit standards for holding public office capability over just lineage.
Meticulous record-keeping again, but for transparency in appointments and actions.
Right. And the criteria for selecting leaders, balancing competence with ensuring diverse perspectives, were included in decision-making bodies. Really crucial stuff.
Sounds fascinating. We hope you'll join us then as we continue this deep dive into the precedents that shape governance.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening.